Religious reasons for Maryland, Pennsylvania, and other middle colonies.
So here's a quick overview of the video. First, we'll talk about Maryland's religious origins, toleration, and the Protestant Revolt. Then we'll talk about Pennsylvania's religious origins, why it was a model colony, and its toleration. Finally, we'll talk about similarities of the middle colonies and why they were attractive to immigrants.
Religious origins. In 1632, Charles I split apart a section of Virginia to make Maryland and gave the land to George Calvert, Lord Baltimore, who was a Catholic noble. Calvert wanted to make Maryland a Catholic refuge due to the Protestant Reformation that was happening in England, which resulted in a hatred towards Catholics. He also hoped that the Catholic settlers would be a vanguard of a vast new feudal domain. The colony would eventually become a Catholic haven away from Protestants in Britain. Toleration. The Act of Toleration, also known as the Act Concerning Religion, was the first law in North America that required religious toleration. It allowed religious freedom for anyone who was Christian. However, anyone who didn't believe in Jesus was prosecuted and could be executed. It was created in Maryland in 1649 by Catholics who were worried the Protestants coming into the area would set massive restrictions on them, as had been done in England. Maryland was the only colony to ever adopt the Act of Toleration. The Protestant Revolt. Protestants in the area were angered by the Catholics, many of whom were landowners, while the growing Protestant population were mainly workers. They instigated a civil war in the late 1600s, which they won. After they won, they repealed the Act of Toleration, which allowed for Catholics to be prosecuted as they once were. The Protestants also made it so that Catholics lost their right to vote in elections and other important matters.
Pennsylvania's religious origins. In 1660, William Penn of England was attracted to the Quaker faith at the age of just 16. He wanted to start a Quaker colony in the New World to experiment with liberal ideas, make a profit, and most importantly, to create a haven for the Quaker faith. Quakers were especially offensive to Protestant authority, so this did not go over very well with his family or the public. Penn was eventually granted a charter to start a colony in the New World in 1681. Why Pennsylvania was a model colony. It was one of the most advertised colonies in the New World, sending out paid agents and distributing pamphlets which contained information that was actually truthful. The government and society was unusually democratic. There was no tax-supported state church, and all residents were guaranteed freedom of worship. There were no immigration restrictions, and becoming a citizen was purposefully easy. The death penalty was only in place for treason and murder, and perhaps most importantly, they strongly opposed slavery. Pennsylvania grew so quickly that it was the third largest colony after only 19 years, behind Virginia and Massachusetts Bay, which had both been there much longer. Toleration in Pennsylvania. The Quakers were very tolerant towards Native Americans. They fairly bought land instead of stealing it, and the two cultures mingled together unarmed and without tension. However, since Quakers also tolerated everyone else, non-Quaker immigrants flooded the country, undermining the benevolent policies and ruined what was, quote, the promised land of amicable Indian-white relations.
Middle colony similarities. Most had very fertile soil and lots of land, unlike New England, which meant they were able to grow and export crops, especially grains. Rivers did not have waterfalls, so there were very few manufacturing mills, which would have been run on water power at the time. There were many forests which could be used greatly for lumber and shipbuilding, and many landholdings were mostly intermediate in size compared to the small ones in New England and the large plantations in the South.
Why were the middle colonies attractive to immigrants? All of the middle colonies were more tolerant to various religions than the other colonies. Desirable land was easier to acquire. The governments were more democratic than in other colonies, and the populations were more ethnically mixed, making it easy for immigrants to settle in without feeling like outsiders.